Well, hello everyone. Welcome to week 2 of Reddit League season 5. My name is Zotomo, and I am joined this week by Calamity. As always, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And to complete our triangle of around the world, we are joined this week by Lunacy Echo, a fellow Division 4 player, all the way from the East Coast of the United States. Lunacy, how are you doing? And welcome.
Hello, good morning. I'm doing great, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Glad to have you. Trying to get a couple new, fresh faces this season to join us for the show. Yeah, we were in a very interesting country this week. We were in Jordan. The coverage was not the most extensive, so practice definitely came into play in this one. And we'll jump right into those Division One results. We can see here it wasn't too difficult, at least for Division One. Quite a few 24-9s. One thing to note before we do jump in, though, Pluki has yet to play. He does have an extension, which means Calamity has to wait for his result for at least another day here. But yeah, Lunacy, any interesting things to talk about from these results in Division One?
I mean, it looks like there's a mix of some pretty high scores, as you know, as usual and expected from Division One. It also looks like there were maybe a few people who maybe were like I guess a little bit off in maybe one or two of the different seeds. Like the Division One seed was pretty tough. Like there's no perfect scores here,
Mm.
but in the end, most locations were pretty gettable. Like there were definitely good clues for each of them, and it looks like you know at the top are sort of the usual suspects, but lots of people doing pretty well here. Although interestingly, there were a lot of matchups that could have ended in draws, but here it looks like only one has so far. So we're just waiting on Pluki.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. In the basement had a pretty good start, Calamity last week, but this time kind of caught up with him. Wasn't able to get a draw out of another one of those top finishers last season. Box, of course, too strong. Again, him and Raidman with the highest score in the seed.
Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily expect a win against Boxer on any given map, but yeah, Basement struggling a bit with Jordan. He was reasonably close on most locations. 13 kilometers was the furthest he was away, but you know, in Jordan with the coverage not being all that much, not being super far spread around, that already costs you over 1,400 points. And then the rest comes together from just no aces for Basement this week, none at all. So he doesn't add on to his one ace from last week. Apart from that, yeah, Orpheus and Nimrith actually pretty close to a draw there. So a bit unfortunate for Nimrith as well because 24.7k is still a pretty decent score, but just not enough, not even for a bonus point. Yeah, Raidman and Boxer, you just can't separate them. Even if they don't get perfect games, they still get the same score, 24,995. Yeah, Bulgo, great game as well. Drawing there with Raidman, that's always gonna help you out, especially because he had a pretty rough season last time around. Pretty sure he only got 9 points over the whole season and then won the relegation play against Chicago. Yeah, Mr. Blue with an important win against Verdok as well, and yeah, I hope my score is at least good enough for a draw and a bonus points, but let's see if Pluki can what he can do, if he can make it a draw himself or if he falls just short.
Well, taking a looking at that table after 2 weeks, we can see that Pluki is at the bottom, and you are currently in fifth, Calamity. But that is, of course, going to be dependent on how that matchup plays out. Box and Raidman, our finalists from last season, are the ones still on top. Orpheus and Mr. Blue move up in those top positions. So yeah, Lunacy, it's only been 2 weeks, but anything you want to say about the Division One table and how it's shaping up so
Hmm.
far?
Ooh, is Calamity's position like based on like the at least guaranteed what
No, it's based on what he
Zatoma's
has from. Yeah.
Zatoma's already given me 3 points for the match that's not over yet. I'll take them. Uh,
Well, yeah. The problem is that my software automatically gives you a point because Pluki's entered as a 0 right now. But yeah, your position in the table is accurate. Your points are not.
Ooh, okay. So depending on how Pluki goes, there might be room for you to rise up. But yeah, like it looks like, you know, to absolutely no one's surprise, we have Boxa and Raid Manmucha at the top. And I'm actually, it's early game so far. I'm impressed with Nimrif, who hadn't really gotten known that well before this season because I think Nimrif is new to D1, right? Or like
Yes.
new to Reddit League entirely. Yeah. Um, I'm impressed that they're holding their own and staying ahead of some like stalwarts of the Reddit League, like in the Basement and Wardok and Pluki, and well, Bulgur as well. Uh, and it looks like there actually is already like a pretty significant spread happening. You've got people with every point value from 7 to 0 so far. So this division looks like it's definitely the skill levels are going to separate people, and that's happening already.
Exactly. Calamity.
Yeah, I'll be at least in third place after this week once Luke is played because I will be getting at least 2 points and I've got a higher total score than Orpheus, so that puts me at least there, and it also will put me at most there because even if I get 3 points, Raidman has the better score, so well I'll be third. Whether it will be on 5 or 6 points is yet to be seen. And yeah, on Nimrith, a few words. There is a sort of side competition in the French community as well, which is called the Cactus League. Don't ask me why. There's a lot of cactus themed maps in there though, and he is first in that. So he is definitely a very very good player. Fits in that Division 1 as well. So far, the Frenchmen have gone up a bit in the table, but they're still not in a fantastic position just yet. But we'll see if that changes in the future. Yeah, so far everything going pretty well for me. I had to get my points early because now it's gonna get a bit more difficult with in the future some more difficult opponents. Although none of the opponents so far were easy, but still I had some good maps for myself. It's gonna get less fun soon.
Yeah, definitely Verdoc, the one who's going to be looking to change things around in the next week. And next week, we do get to our first world map. We are on the Volvo Dealerships of the World map. So we will be starting next to a Volvo dealership in every location. It is pretty much a world map. They're not in every country, but they are spread completely around the world. And yeah, Calamity, your matchup against Boxing will definitely be one to watch because it's quite a real challenge for you. But anything else you're looking forward to seeing the result of, Lunacy?
Um, I mean, it looks like there's some the Calamity versus Boxing match is sure to be interesting. Orpheus versus Raidman is definitely going to be interesting. And we also will have Pluki versus Verdoc, who are at the moment, barring any performance from Pluki in round two. At the moment, the two bottom ones on the table, so that could definitely make a difference, especially since a one good game jumps you up to mid-table automatically since it's early season.
Yeah, Calamity, Orpheus, and Raidman, a repeat of the semifinal from last season.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting game. Maybe not the map that you want to have to really split the two apart in a game like that. I do expect most people, well, maybe not most people, but I expect a lot of draws in this week on Volvo dealerships because it is a world map, which generally gets you a lot of draws if it's not the most difficult seed. And I don't think Volvo dealerships has that many super difficult seeds because car dealerships usually happen to be in cities. Can't really sell a car to a tree. And therefore, I'm expecting a lot of draws, which is not necessarily something that I do very well in. I've always said, I want as hard of a map as possible. Even if I have to play against a super strong player, I still rather play on a more difficult map. Just because I don't like the feeling of a map where if you make one small mistake, you've lost pretty much immediately. And yeah, I just don't do well with cities in general. Yeah, as Lunacy mentioned, Pluki Verdok is going to be a pretty interesting game as well. Both of them, well, Verdok's been in this position before, 2 seasons ago, where he was fighting against relegation and couldn't quite avoid it. He's now back in Division 1 and hasn't had the best of starts, with 2 losses in the first 2 weeks and also quite some distance behind in the total score. And Pluki, we don't know yet. He might get a perfect score in the second week and be right up there again. But if he doesn't, then he'll also be in that pretty rough position. And I think there's like 4 to 5 candidates who are looking at fighting against relegation potentially. And every point counts. So a map like this is especially important because you can relatively easily get a 25k, and with that you guarantee yourself already 3 points. And if someone makes some mistakes and drops more than 100 points here, you can gain a lot on them in 1 week. And yeah, basement against Nimrif could also be a pretty interesting one as well, because yeah, both of them, I think Nimrif's probably a bit higher in the table, but in his first season, it's always difficult for newcomers, especially in a division that's as tough as Division 1. So I wouldn't want to count him towards the promotion well, not promotion, obviously, but playoff candidates just yet. But basement fighting against relegation. So yeah, for both of them could be a pretty important matchup as well.
Hey, well, moving on to Division 2 and their results in Jordan. And for Lunacy, this is definitely an American-heavy division and pretty good scores for all of them, but mixed results. Guelo not doing too poorly, but Shumi, a very nice score and a couple of close draws as well.
Yeah, it looks like this was a pretty well doable seed. You know, we've got over half the division getting 24 nines or above, and that's even including the 0 from Moist Flubber there. And yeah, there were definitely some very close matches here. A couple draws. Really unfortunate for Guayla Wizard there, you know, because that would have drawn against a lot of people, but unfortunately just had to go up against the sole 25k there. And it looks like it was only Latomp and Aistaru that maybe flubbed on like 1 or 2 of the locations, but luckily for Aistaru, their opponent didn't play, unfortunately. Is that what happened there?
Yes.
Yeah, Moist Flubber yellow carded, did not play his seed in time, did not ask for an extension either. So yeah, Ice does get lucky. Aguilo, really unfortunate there, and that score isn't even good enough for a bonus point, Calamity.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But it's, to be honest, it's not even that close in terms of position to the bonus point either. Well, it's not super far away, but the last person who does get the bonus point is Max with 24,972, and there's still LCN between the two as well before we get to Guelo Wizard. And yeah, apart from that, yeah, you said it, Tom and Ice, not with the best of scores, even though like 22.8 and 22.9k are still not bad scores by any means, but for Latom, not enough for any points, and Ice Star, of course, they're getting away with one there a bit. We'll see if Moist Flubber comes back to playing. He still hasn't played it, so it's not like he just was an hour late or something and didn't mention anything. So I don't know what's up with him. We'll hope that he comes back next week, because if he doesn't, then, well, it's not any difference to Ice anyway, because everyone will get 3 points from him. Pretty high scoring draw there from Clyde and Renato, which is a pretty interesting one as well. I think both of them candidates for maybe fighting for just around that 3rd, 4th place potentially, with, if everything goes right for them, maybe even having a chance at 1st or 2nd. Yeah, Shumi as well, great with a perfect score. That's always very important in a scenario like this, where you see a lot of people with very high scores, but you're the only one who actually managed to really pinpoint everything. Makes a big difference there. And with Guelo just being outside of that draw range as well, that's 4 points to him, which is super important.
Well, taking a look at that Division 2 table, we will see that perfect game from Shumi does help bolster him up into 2nd position. Renata, who's only dropped 7 points all season so far in the first 2 games, still has not found a win, sees herself in 3rd. Max jumping up with that nice draw, a little bit of a bonus point there. Moist Flubber, despite not playing, still stays out of the bottom 2 spaces. LCN and Orboka claim those 2. His win in week 1 keeps him just afloat at 10. Yeah, Lunacy, Americans scattered all throughout this, including at the top position and the next to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, like this is definitely a lot tighter of a division, it would seem, than Division One, at least so far. With only 3 points, that's just one win separating first place and 10th place, and 10th place is one who didn't even play in the last round. So, um, yeah, it looks like there's definitely going to be a lot of sway in the coming few weeks. Just given how tight and how close everything is. I mean, like even like all of the top six in in at the moment had scores that could have easily tied other people in the last round, and it was just a bit of luck regarding like which people got wins and which people got draws or and any of that. Um, it looks like our newcomers to this division are also doing pretty well for themselves, I have to say.
Yeah, Renata and Snorlax in third and fourth. Latom's not too bad. Has picked up 3 points so far. Calamity's in eighth.
Yeah, that's still respectable. I just had not the greatest time in Jordan. Did get a perfect game though in the first week, so still in 8th place right there. And yeah, everything's still very close together here, even with already having like 4 perfect games in the divisions. No one's above 6 games yet. No one with 2 wins out of those 2 weeks. And yeah, everything's still like first to fifth is only 1 point, so just one bad result, and you're suddenly from first to out of the promotion spots. But there's a lot that still can happen here. A bit funny to see Renata in third with a -2 score difference, without a loss, just 2 draws there. But yeah, interesting. The one interesting thing I saw when looking at the table was that I was looking at the aces a bit, and despite almost like, well, out of the top 7, all of the top scorers, no one's dropped more than 200 points. But there's a pretty big difference in aces here or there. You can see like Barry, Shumi, and Renato with 9 aces, and the likes of Guelo and Clyde only with 5 and 6, respectively. So that could be interesting going forward. Maybe for some of the easier maps, like Volvo car dealerships next week, where the likes of Clyde or Guelo might be having a bit more trouble getting that perfect score in there and might be losing a point here or there. Whereas for the others who have shown that they can pinpoint rounds in potentially more difficult maps without too many problems, might be in for a bit of an easier time at getting those perfect games in.
Very nice. Well, yeah, there are matchups for week 3 in that world map of the Volvo dealerships. We still have no Americans playing each other. Second week in a row where all these Americans avoid each other. But atop of the table matchup, Barry Fishy Bear taking on Shumi. Lunacy is sure to be one to watch.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I wonder what the odds are about the two no American derbies in a row. But yeah, that is definitely going to be a very, very interesting match. I mean, based on how things have gone so far, one must assume that it will end in a draw. But you never know. Maybe someone will make a fatal mistake, and that could potentially spell the trajectory of this division going on throughout the rest of the season. And aside from that, it looks like there's definitely a lot of very interesting and crucial matchups as well. A lot of matchups between people that are only 1 or 2 points apart. Um, and it sort of looks like a lot of these matchups are, well, I was about to say it looks like a lot of them are against people who are similar position in the table. That's not really true now that I think about it. But that similar in position at the table at the moment doesn't mean that much given how close everything is. So this, we talked about how doable a world map like this is, especially at a higher division. So next week might not be the one that makes the most difference, but it definitely could set the tone for the rest of the season based on who comes out on top here.
Definitely. Any matchups that you're looking forward to, Calamity?
I just wanted to mention, because Lunacy said, like, especially at a higher division, I think for lower divisions, it's even more easy on these world maps, because I feel like where the higher divisions really excel is like difficult countries, like getting high scores in countries that some of the lower divisions people maybe wouldn't get them in, or wouldn't get them in as consistently. But with a world map that's also city heavy, you would expect that the advantage that the higher division players would normally have isn't that big, whereas the time difference of getting like 4.5 or 5 minutes even in Division 5 could really make a big difference there to secure some aces here or there in the more difficult rounds. But yeah, it gets even more fun because the 2 weeks after that also don't have any American derbies. So it'll be 4 weeks in a row without any American duels in a division that has 5 out of 12 people being American. Yeah, if someone wants to calculate the chances for that, they're probably not as low as we actually expect them to be right now, but they're also probably not very high. Yeah. And yeah, there's definitely some interesting matches there. I feel like both games actually, Clyde against Ordboka and LCN against Iceflower could already be pretty interesting. Because Clyde is probably one of the candidates for at least upper table position, but also not one of the players where you'd expect it to be like the super difficult matchup that you've got no chance against. And with Ordboka currently being in the position that he is in last place, those are the kinds of people that from now on he will need to get points against if he wants to stay in the division. It's probably not going to be enough anymore to just get points against like 11th and 10th occasionally. And for LCN and Ithar as well, Ice just got his 3 points against Moist Flower, but only because of his yellow card, and LCN with 2 decent games, I think, but also only with just 1 point so far. So both of them also need to watch out to not lose track of the upper half of the table.
Oh, very nice. Well, shifting over to Division 3 and their results in Jordan, we had a second yellow card this week with Hugo unfortunately unable to play. So Freckles will be a little bit happy not getting the best of scores, 23,000 there. Of course, Firebond had withdrawn at the beginning. Not that Armand needed that one at all, Lunacy.
Yeah, when I was playing through the seeds myself, I found Division 3 to be the easiest seed, and it looks like there was definitely the most variation in scores for this seed out of all the ones we've seen so far. You know, we've got 4 different 25Ks, which is definitely going to be good for these players' stats. But we've also got we've also got 21, a 22, and 18K. So there were definitely some tough locations that if you could figure out where you were, they were still pinpointable, I think is mainly what happened. And it looks like that Boutbat and Closed just happened to be unfortunate enough to both get 25Ks, but both be matched against each other, which is a bit sad, but they're both getting 3 points out of this, I think. Yeah, they're both getting 3 points out of this, so, you know, can't be too unhappy there. And in terms of other matchups, it looks like, you know, WTF and Freckles both getting a little bit lucky with sort of bottom table scores, but being matched up against either absences or other bottom table people to still be able to score some points in maybe not the best map of the season, but still with high enough scores to, you know, score some points.
Exactly. Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I mentioned last week how Jordan may not necessarily be the map that you want to get a freebie on because you can only really make a difference if you score a perfect game. And I'm always like, don't care, didn't ask, and did it anyway. So he can be happy about that. An additional point there. Steal the Snick as well with a perfect game. He likes downplaying his skills so far and is like, maybe I can avoid relegation. But so far he's doing very well. Against Seppo's probably the favorite now to get relegated. He's just sort of avoided over the last couple seasons to get relegated, but it's not looking great so far for him this season. Both this game and also week 1 was a pretty terrible score. This one's not that bad actually, but still not particularly close to any points there. Freckles will take those 3 points against Hugo because he also didn't have a fantastic game, but just good enough. And yeah, as Lunacy said, Bootbar against Closed, both of them a perfect game. And both of them getting 3 points for it. I'm sure they would have preferred someone else, but I guess you kind of know at that point that you've played against a very strong opponent and you've got him out of the way and you got 3 points for it. So I guess in that case, in that sense, it's not too bad either. And yeah, Blockchain also not been having the best season since coming back from essentially his ban from last season. Not a fantastic score there. But I think he'll do better once we get to some of the maybe more common maps, like the world maps, or maybe some of the countries that are more commonly played. And yeah, Paulinho as well with a good win there over Pastek.
Well, taking a look at their table, yeah, definitely W2F and Freckles will be very happy with a bit of luck to see themselves in 4th and 5th, respectively. Steelers Nick with that perfect game only sees himself up into 6th. But yeah, Armand has yet to drop a single point in Reddit League in his first 2 weeks. So an excellent start from him. Yeah, at the other end, things pretty rough. A big divide here. Seppo not yet to pick up any points. Blockchain only 1 and yet to find a win. So already a bit of a divide spread kind of happening in Division 3. Maybe not as tight as we saw in Division 2, Lunacy.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm, impressed with Armand. I mean, I know that Armand is an incredibly good player, but to be one of the, I think, 2 people in the entire competition so far who just haven't dropped a single point on either map is very impressive. And we'll see if we can continue that through the next week, which honestly, if anyone would be able to, I can expect him to. Um, Aside from that, it looks like Armand is like pretty clearly in the lead, with a 2-point gap between Armand and Bootbot, and the next 2-point gap is between 2nd and 7th. So there's definitely a bit of a spread happening here, with 8 points separating 1st and 11th, really, because Firebond's just not going to pick up any points this season. The most interesting thing to me at the moment is something that makes me very, very happy, and it's that the top 4 players, like all their names, all spell out ABCD.
We'll just have to put the whole division in alphabetical order, and then we'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll see if they can sort themselves out by the end of the season. I'm actually a little bit surprised to see Paulinho and Hugo to be sort of an 8th and 9th, because I consider them to be, at least from my experience, to be some of the better players in the division. Although it looks like Paulinho's on the up and up, and Hugo didn't play last week, so that could potentially explain it. And I'm happy to see Steel the Snake, who was one of my fellow Division 4 players last season, to be doing this well and holding their own in a tough division.
Yeah, Calamity. Pretty nice setup for at least the top players to start off. Very good starts for a lot of the higher end players. But yeah, some of our more kind of seasoned veterans not having the best of times. And it's only been 2 weeks, but it has been 2 weeks.
Yeah. I think this division is a bit of a weird one. It just feels different to the other divisions. I mean, that's partially, I guess, because Faraband's already stopped competing before the season, or just after the season essentially began. So we're basically down to 11 players, and then we've kind of got, even though it might not look like it in the table yet, it feels like a pretty clear division between the people that might be fighting for promotion and the people that might more so be fighting against relegation. You've also got, I think I'm going to make that assumption now because I'm not 100% sure, but I think there's like no other division with so little aces. If you look at some of the players like Hugo and Blockchain, no aces so far. WTF is in 5th with 1 ace after 2 weeks. Even looking further up, like Bootbot, Closed, Steal the Snick are in 2nd place essentially with the aces and only have 6 each. Of course, Amal, like slightly.
5 of them came in 1 game, so.
Yeah, Amal making a bit of a difference there with his 10 aces, but apart from that, maybe not the strongest division in terms of pinpointers. But yeah, I think, of course, a lot of people benefiting there at the bottom of the table from Faraband already being out, so there's only 1 direct relegation spot. And with the fact that Seppo's apparently in not great form, and Hugo basically barely even has time to play, and Blockchain not coming back in the absolute best form, it might be, for anyone who's above that, it might not be the most difficult season to avoid that drop.
Definitely. Well, yeah, pinpointing won't be the biggest of issues. Again, we could definitely see quite a few 25Ks on the other hand, though. We are in a world map after all, and it doesn't get much easier for a lot of these players. Paulinho towards the bottom having to face off Armand. We do have that Italian derby, which should be promising as well. And then another bottom of the table matchup between Blockchain and Hugo. So any of these that are stand out to you, Lunacy?
Well, it looks like to me that this is going to be, I assume, a week that Seppa will be happy with because, they're finally going to get some points in the league. Aside from that, it looks like a lot of these matches are going to be pretty decisive of how the table, shakes up because we've got a lot of like it feels like we don't have that many matchups against people who are similar to each other. We've got like top versus mid table or like upper mid versus lower mid table matchups, um, and we'll sort of see how that makes a difference. If not, the Armand versus Paulinho map is going to be pretty interesting, I think, given that like Paulinho's a pretty good player, was in Division One of Map Battle League, I think. So if Armand keeps up his streak as it is, that's going to be another pretty rough week for Paulinho. But aside from that, I mean, these matchups just look like they're going to, you know, uh, going to be. I guess only time will tell us like about what this will do.
Mm.
As you were saying, because of the fact that like this division maybe isn't the strongest at pinpointing, that might actually mean that a world map like this one could make a difference. If you could drop 100 points just from slightly sloppy pinpointing on a map like this.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I think it'll also especially make a difference in the sense of that in some of the upper divisions, or maybe in some of the stronger pinpointing divisions lower down, you might expect, like, if it's an easy seed where you can get 25k without too many problems, then getting 25k itself might not make that big of a difference because all of them will get it. So it won't split the players apart too much. But in a division where pinpointing isn't really their strong suit, you can actually have quite a few people get like 24-9 something and therefore drop that important bonus point that other people might be capable of picking up. I do think that Freckles against Steal This Nick is an interesting matchup where I do actually expect almost both of them to pick up a 25k next week. Because Freckles is a very, very experienced player at this point. Steal This Nick as well doesn't strike me as the person who'd like get nerves and would maybe drop a point out of sloppiness or something like that. As Lunacy said, Paulinho is going to not have it too easy against Armand, but maybe seeing how Armand has so far not dropped a point, maybe you do want to play against him on an easy map just to get within that draw range without too many problems and just be like, okay, he's gone in the table, I don't care about him. I'll get into second. I think Blockchain and Hugo is also a very, very important game. You don't have too many bottom of the table matchups here, and those two playing against each other is already going to be a pretty good indication of how the season will go for them both. And yeah, apart from that, WTF Bootbat and Pastek Closed are also some pretty interesting games, looking at potentially fighting for the promotion spots.
Very nice. Well, shifting over to our split divisions in Division 4 and 5, no true derbies in 4A. We did have a couple linguistic derbies in this one. And we finally see your name down here, Lunacy, in the other division. Across from me, Pashtetli, a very nice score, but unfortunately Flipster equal to him. And yeah, for you, Lunacy, a very nice score, and even more lucky that a Soviet seemed to really struggle in Jordan.
Yeah, I was pretty happy to end up with that kind of a score difference. And I think Soviet Spy, their like biggest talent and like a talent that far exceeds mine is like the no moving game, being able to tell where you are just in the landscape, that kind of thing. But that might not help as much in a map like Jordan, which is, a small country, very, very pinpointing heavy. I think in the map, I think the location where they lost the most points, it was one where, so I was like on the right road, but just like in a very different part of it, because all the roads go, like all the big roads go like north south, just throughout the country. Um, Anyways, other than that, it looks like there were some pretty close matches. There have been some very close matches in this division so far. Like with Pashtetli and Flipster only having a 1 point score difference there. Seb Kirsten and McFiat also getting that draw. But aside from that, looks like there were some pretty decisive wins thanks to some lucky or perhaps some unlucky matchups. I I personally think that a lot of people in this division are very talented, but it's interesting that it feels like the talent skews in like a couple different directions. Some people are like clearly better at no moving, some people are clearly better at like the pinpointing game. So that's kind of an interesting thing to watch out for in terms of matchups moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And Calamity, yeah, Wakelock and Hexalt, they're two long-time Division 4 rivals. Hexalt coming out on top by quite a significant margin against Wakelock in this one.
Yeah, Wakelock was always going to have a pretty rough season ahead of him. He just about managed to avoid relegation, I think, last season as well. Benefiting from, I think, though, let me look it up again because I'm not 100% sure. Though I could have sworn there was... no, there was actually no red card in Division 4 last season, so he just had some other players who were struggling a bit more below him. He finished 7th, actually, in Division 4B last season. As we'll see later on in the table, he's actually not doing too bad if we're just looking at the overall performance, because in terms of aces, he's not too far behind, but it just seems to be always like 1 or 2 rounds where he's like not... Essentially, his problem is not that he just can't quite get the last pinpointing right, but that, sometimes in a round that maybe is not that favorable to him, he just doesn't even necessarily get close, which then ends up, of course, with him not picking up any points at all, where if you're just a bit off on the pinpointing, you might still get a draw here or there. A bit unfortunate for Mick Pete, who comes in with 24,968, but just the 6th best score, and therefore only picks up 1 point for that. And yeah, Solar Sensei with the 7th best score, no problems against Dromi, who's so far been consistently at sort of that 20, 21k mark, maybe 22k, but just doesn't seem to be quite able to fight with some of the higher scoring people in the division. And yeah, he said as well, Pashtetli just 1 point ahead of Flipster there. Fortunately for both of them, or fortunately for Flipster in this case, just about good enough for a bonus point here as well.
Well, let's take a look at their table in 4A, and things are pretty tight. Soviet, despite not picking up a win, still sitting on 3 points. Hexalt in first has 5. No perfect games in this division yet, but quite a few aces to go around, especially in that top half of the table. So yes, after 2 weeks, not a whole lot to separate them out. Very close. But yeah, obviously Wakelock, the veteran, not having the best of start to the bottom there, Lunacy.
Yeah, I mean, this is, sort of about as tight as it gets. All like the top 4, all of us have the same number of points. And even with the total score, like I'm tied with Sebkirs there, like both of us dropping 16 points so far, it looks like. And yeah, like the dream of a perfect season is gone for all of us now, since nobody is on 2 wins. But I feel like that is sort of a testament to how perhaps evenly matched a lot of us are. With just 2 points separating first and 7th here. Really, this is sort of an anything can happen kind of moment. We've also had like 2, I think, relatively doable seeds so far. Like last week in Poland, we definitely had the easiest seed out of the 5, and this one there was definitely room for some very high scoring. Barring the impossible to pinpoint round 1 location aside. But yeah, like you can sort of see from the total score and also just number of aces. I feel like it's pretty evenly matched. So hopefully if McPete, Dromi, and Wakelock get some lucky matchups in the next few weeks, they might be able to, it wouldn't be hard basically with like 1 or 2 good weeks for them to jump up even to the like upper half of the table.
Yeah, Calamity, an interesting thing to point out, particularly a 1-point score differential. That I think that might be about as small as we could possibly see it.
Yeah, he had a perfect, again, it's a bit difficult to really use the terms because perfect draw pretty much means both like drawing with 25k each and also drawing with the exact same amount of points. But he drew with the exact same amount of points last week and then now got +1 in his score difference. We'll see. Maybe at this rate he'll get to like +6, +7 maybe towards the end of the season. We'll see if his points end up higher than his score difference. But yeah, Lunacy, I don't know what you mean in round 1. I had no problems 5k'ing that. But yeah, that was essentially where quite a few people dropped a couple of points this week. I know Carp as well wasn't too happy with that round 1, and Jake as well. I think got close enough, but also was a bit unhappy about a mistake he made on that. But yeah, I think definitely the closest division so far, if you look at just the top half, and first to sixth, just 1 point apart, very, very close still. And even their total score is super close. But that is like one of the advantages of having like such a long running tournament where, the longer it goes on, the more even players will be inevitably in the divisions. There's still some players you look at and you're like, hey, he probably deserves to be in a higher or a lower division. But at the end of the day, especially for the people who've been here since like season 1 or season 2, there's not a lot of people actually who've been here since season 1. I think we might be coming down to like, we're slowly getting towards the single digits, but there's still a few here. But yeah, you can kind of see the divide there at the bottom a bit between Soviet and McPete. But yeah, Soviet as well. I said it in the previous show. I think I said it last week as well, but this week it really showed how, like I mentioned, his problems of being consistent throughout, and maybe it's less a case of like putting out consistent performances, but more so being consistently good over different maps, which he's struggling with. And there's still quite a few difficult countries and maps coming up. I'm looking at like Russia, Australia, and a hard world where just those even existing, although I think like Soviets, he might not be having the most problems with Russia. And I think, well, he's got the Australian flag, so he might not be having...
He is Australian.
Yeah, so he might not be having too many problems with Australia either. So I think those maps will be pretty important for him to see where he ends up in the table.
Yeah, I'm glad I faced off against him this week instead of one of those.
Yeah. We'll shift over then to their fixtures for the upcoming world map. And again, no real derbies to look forward to here. Though a couple linguistic ones, again, Pashtetli facing off against the other German, and you, Lunacy, taking on Wakelock, both English speakers. But yeah, a pretty kind of across the board kind of mix of matchups here. A couple top to bottom matchups and a couple close to the top. Probably one of the most interesting ones here, Hexalt and Flipster, Lunacy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's always fun when 1 and 2 play against each other, just to see how that shakes things up. And hopefully if they end up tying and not getting as many points as they could, if I happen to do well against Wakelock, then that's spells good things for me. Aside from that, it's fun to see that Pashtetli and Sebkir start against each other because they're just one ranking apart on the table, which means that in theory that it's not impossible that Pashtetli gets another very, very narrow matchup. We'll see how low Pashtetli can keep his score difference across the season. Solar Sensei versus McPete is going to be a fun one as well because I feel like both in last season and this season so far, Solar Sensei has been just getting a little bit unlucky with how things are shaking out because I honestly consider Solar Sensei to be like a really, really good player. So this might be a good opportunity for some points because it looks like a couple of the newcomers, McPete and Dromi, are doing sort of like middlingly well, like never doing like bad,
Mm.
but also haven't had any like real standout games so far.
Mm. Definitely, yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, so since they had the second highest total score actually last season in Division 4A and only came in sixth, so that kind of goes to show your point of maybe not having the luckiest matchups. But yeah, this season so far as well, he's actually right around where he should be in terms of his total score. He's in sixth with the sixth highest total score, but he's much closer in that towards the bottom than he is towards the people behind him. But then again, he also does have 4 points, which is only 1 point behind first place right now. So all makes sense, all checks out. And yeah, I think Verstädtli Seppkirst flips the hex out could both be pretty interesting maps, like just judging from what we've seen so far. All of those are candidates who could potentially be fighting for the promotion spots. I don't quite know yet about Verstädtli because he's not like been too up there so far in the seasons that he's been taking part in. If he finished, let me look it up. He finished 8th in season 3 and he finished 8th in season 4. So it seems like he's really like made that next step up to maybe fight for that promotion spot this season. But yeah, as we've said as well, the Division 4 seats haven't been too difficult so far, so we'll have to see how it looks for him in the upcoming weeks.
Well, shifting over to the other side in Division 4B and their results, two perfect games to mention here, Hidekmi and Diesel. So Diesel having a really good start to the season. That's his second perfect game. For that, yeah, this one though, much stronger scores overall. Nobody under 22.8. I think Laban Grebia with the lowest score there, just under 23,000. So these players doing a little bit better on the same seed as 4A. Lunacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've also been doing a lot better than we have in terms of perfect games, you know? Like Diesel being the, I think, other person in the league who hasn't dropped a single point so far this season. Yeah. And of course, Adikmi also getting that perfect game there, really showing, I think, a lot of improvement from, most of his games last season, at least. Which is really good to see. Looks like Adikmi's been grinding at it. Aside from that, it looks like there weren't actually any ties in this division. So a lot of potentially lucky or unlucky matchups depending on who you are and who's taking advantage of your positions. Seems like the scores in general sort of match up with what you might expect. We've got a couple of perfect scores, a couple of near perfect scores, and a couple of maybe you're just off in one location. But yeah, altogether, while the scores here seem like they're a lot more uniform than in 4A, I think overall, these scores might, belie a sort of wider gap than there is in 4A in terms of top and bottom table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I completely agree with Lunacy there. That's also what I've been thinking, is that Division 4 might be a bit more split in the middle, and the players at the top are very, very good, and the players at the bottom are still good players, but might not be quite capable of fighting for some of the places higher up, and might more so be concentrating on not getting relegated. And just losing a couple of points already early on in the season could be pretty rough for you there, because it can be pretty difficult to make up in a division that is set up like that, because the top probably won't be dropping very many points unless they face each other on super difficult maps. Because on the easy maps, if they play against each other, you can probably expect draws there, mostly bonus points given out to them. So if you can't really afford many bad weeks at all if you want to fight for promotion, and it'll be really interesting to see how this division plays out at the top. And yeah, as Lunacy said, not really the most surprising results this week. Maybe Laban Greb a bit lower than you might have expected. But apart from that, roughly what you'd expect. And yeah, Diesel and Hedegme with perfect games. Diesel was like 1 meter away in week 1, so he finally got his perfect game. And yeah, Diesel, as we said, without fault so far, no points dropped.
Well, yeah, looking at that table, those scores very close, but the points not close at all. As we can mention, the Diesel, Hidekmi, Carp, and even here Yemeni there was 6 points, really having a big gap between the rest of the field. 3 players in this one, including myself, yet to pick up any points, even though their total scores aren't that bad. But you can definitely see that might also have something to do with some of the pinpointing in terms of the aces down there at the bottom as well, Lunacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, in a division like this, where you have time, like where you have a bit more time, like pinpointing starts to matter a bit more and more if you want to just pick up some points against, I guess, any of these opponents. Um, uh, I'm very, very impressed with the top three so far in this division. Like combined, they've only dropped a total of 5 points, which is uh, fewer points dropped than any single individual other player in the division. Um, and we're sort of almost seeing a repeat of last season where I think like both Diesel and Steelless Nick were at the top of the table in 4B for like a very long time, both like having very few draws or losses even. And it's looking like that kind of thing might be starting to happen with Diesel and Adikmi as well. Um, Carp, of course, putting up a very strong performance there as well. The mid table here is honestly a little bit surprising because I consider Jake, Nakira, and Labangreb all to be like incredibly good players, but also like this 4B is full of incredibly good players. So maybe not the most surprising, especially given that we're only a couple of weeks in. And like even the players currently at the bottom of the table, yourself, Zotomo, Tripliha, and Pork Steaks, like based on how they've been doing so far, I don't think any of them are like clearly in the relegation zone. Like I feel it genuinely does feel like one of those divisions where even though the points indicate like a pretty strong separation, it feels like anything could happen in between places 5 or 6 to 10, and we'll be excited to see what happens in places 1 through 4 or 5.
Yeah, Calamity, we talked about at the beginning of the season that there were probably 2 or 3 players who would run away with this, and everybody else would be fighting for scraps, pretty much being a very close ranking between 4th and 10th. And yeah, after just 2 weeks, we almost see that instantly coming to fruition here.
Yeah, it is kind of turned out like that. I just didn't expect Hedekme to be up there so well, but I also have to admit I kind of already forgot that he was second in Division 4A in Season 3, though that back then was the division that had 3 of 10 players red carded. So don't know how much you can give about, how much that really holds true. But he's done very well so far. I also liked how Lunacy said he was very impressed by the top 3 because, well, shame on Herr Yemini and his 17 drop points. It's unforgivable. But yeah, it is actually an interesting look at him because he does only have 6 aces. So his 17 dropped points came from 4 different rounds, which certainly might not be the best thing going forward on especially a map like Volvo dealerships, where one dropped point could have pretty significant, could be pretty significant going forward in terms of points. And this also kind of shows like what I said earlier with how just losing like one match can already put you in a pretty bad position, because I do expect Jake to be fighting for the promotion spots as well, but he's now already like 3 points behind and like 900 something score difference behind, and it looks pretty difficult to make up, because if you're looking at those guys up there like Diesel, Hedekme, Carp, and Heyemine, you're kind of looking at them and going, well, I'm not really sure where they're going to be dropping so many points from. And it kind of already puts you on the back foot of Jake now has to kind of almost be perfect. He has to pick up his wins every week. And if he falls further behind, it's going to get pretty close to already being impossible to make up those points.
Nice. Well, looking at their fixtures for that world map, we do have an American derby with Jake's facing off against Port Stakes. That's kind of a towards the top of the division versus kind of the bottom. For that, yeah, it doesn't get any easier for me either. Lunacy taking on Harry Yemeni. I've faced the first 3 weeks, three of the top four players in the division.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. But that means that you're getting it out of the way, right?
But
And
let's hope so.
yeah, I've heard tell of debates between whether it's better to face the hard opponents earlier or later in the season. Um, but yeah, a lot of interesting matchups here. We've got another beautiful first versus second position matchup with Hedikmi and Diesel here. So like already, one of them is going to uh, well, not necessarily like it's impossible to end up with both of them still having a perfect record. So we're cutting that dream off early. Aside from that, Jake is a very good world player. I know he's probably hurting that this isn't an uncommon world and it's Volvo instead. But the fact that he is such a good world player means that, based on Pork Stakes' performance so far, that might spell some, good points in his future there. Um, Carp versus Nakiro might also be a pretty interesting one because I think Nakiro is a generally stronger world player than individual country player. I'm not 100% sure, but that might also be a pretty good match to see just what Nakiro can do against a pretty good player like Carp.
Yeah, Calamity three players still looking for their first points of the season in this one. Any chance of them picking them up in this week?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be surprised if all three of you would still end up with 0 points after this week because it'd take quite the bad performance, I think, to that all three of you wouldn't get above 24.9k on a map like Volvo Dealerships unless you get like a super difficult seed. Yeah, I think Jake, for him, it's already kind of a must-win game against Pork Steaks, who's down there at the bottom of the table. Although Pork Steaks, I think, as well, is a pretty decent player on a world map. But this might be his chance as well. If Pork Steaks does drop more than 100 points, then maybe he can make up a few points already here against the likes of Headache Me or Diesel, who are playing against each other. So inevitably, they can't both pick up 4 points. And yeah, Zotomo against Heyemine, that it won't be much easier than any of the other two games so far. But yeah, we did look at his aces for Heyemine, and maybe that is your chance to, if you can get a really good game together, to pick up a few points here. Because in a map like this, it'll be especially interesting to look at who gets the bonus points or not. Because I'm fully expecting like there'll be one division where it's like 6 people will get a perfect score and one of them will lose out on a bonus point, even with a perfect score. I think that would be the first time in the history of Reddit League that we'd have someone miss out on a bonus point with 25k. But I can definitely see it happening.
Well, that would be impressive for sure. Hopefully, that's not me.
Yeah, just to inform the viewers, because I, of course, know what the answer to this question is. If in the case of a tie, how is the bonus point differential thing decided? Is it by time or distance?
It is by time. It has been distance until this season, and we've changed it. It actually isn't super clear in the rule sheets because Baseman asked me about this just a few days ago as well. Because it is like mentioned under the playoff section. Because usually like in the regular season, it only comes into play when it's split between like 6th and 7th or like 5th and 6th in the 10-player divisions. But yeah, it is time.
Nice. Well, finally to our last division in Division 5 and their results. And yeah, a pretty big mixed bag here, Lunas, you take a look at this. Sethlin will definitely be happy to pick up a win against Jamambi with that low score, but a couple other high scores. They didn't really need to. The American Derby, though, Xander and Artificial will be really frustrated, and they ended up going up against each other in a week like this.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of the more eclectic divisions, I think. You've got a lot of range in skill level, or at least based on, like with that impression being based on past performances in different leagues. Um, and Zotomo, I think you're completely right in that Xander and Artificial both should be happy with the fact that they did super well on this map. It was actually a pretty tough seed given the fact that you had a lot of time to do it. And I'm sure that they'll both be disappointed to have drawn, given that they're clearly the two. Well, no, actually, that's not right. That's not true.
Ollie kind of split them.
Yeah,
but
yeah, those two and Ollie being like the three best scorers there in that division. Aside from that, it sort of seems like the results are a bit as you'd expect there, with just like a lot of variation between scores and a lot of potential in this division for some high score differences that may not necessarily have resolved in such a way. But yeah, nothing super surprising here, I don't think.
yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I think the most surprising part here for me is the relatively low general scores, because while the Division 5 seed definitely wasn't the easiest one by any stretch of the imagination, it wasn't that difficult either. So it is a bit surprising to me to see like quite a few people below 20k, and some of them even going as low as 13k on Jamabi. Zeppelin will definitely be happy about that, getting 3 points with just 16k. So yeah, that's a bit interesting to me. I think 59 Soundbite as well, pretty good score for him actually. After his comeback this season into Reddit League, 23.8k on a map like Jordan, definitely seems pretty good for him, and maybe he can even manage to stay in the division this time around. And yeah, not the greatest week for the polls. Penguin also only, well, actually, I'm completely forget what I'm saying. I just looked at Cephalin's score again, and I was like, not the greatest. Well, not the greatest week for them in terms of scores. Of course, Cephalin picking up his 3 points would probably beg to differ about it not being a good week for him. But yeah, we kind of see what we expected for the better players of the division, with Xander, Artificial, and Ollie all picking up some pretty good points and with some pretty great scores.
Well, looking at that table, those scores are kind of all over the place, but there is a pretty nice kind of smooth line as we look at this point distribution among these players. Xander, Artificial, and Slytherin, despite his low score, does stay perfect. So he'll be really happy with that on the top three. But then even down into 7th and 8th are still on 3 points within one game of that first position there, Lunacy.
Yeah, this is a super tight mid-table. At the top we have Xander, Artificial, and Sethlin all with 6 points there, and Sethlin being the only player to remain with like all wins, which is very interesting because Sethlin with like the third worst score of the field in the last game happened to match up against the player with the worst score in the field. So, maybe there's a little bit of luck there, with the total score number of aces also perhaps supporting the theory. But the fact that Sethlin is like accumulating this many points early game, might provide the momentum and motivation to keep that up for the rest of the season. Aside from that, though, I wouldn't entirely be surprised if some players like Ollie or Clemens Kirchik or Soundbite, started doing well and surpassing Sethlin. Although I'm not sure if they can get to where Xander and Artificial are, just based on the fact that those two players have incredibly high total scores, incredibly high ace numbers, and also the only two to have perfect games so far. But if we're talking mid-table, the separation between 4th to 8th, like it's only a single point. There's bound to be tons of swinging happening there, and with Vincenzo and Bombadil at the bottom, both of them have gotten a couple losses early in the season, but both of them, based on their total scores, do seem well within the realm of competition with other people in a similar range to be able to get some points moving forward as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the other side of this, Vincenzo and Bombadil Calamity, 2 veterans of Division 5, are really struggling at the start of this season.
Yeah, I also just had the thought that maybe it would be a good idea for future seasons to maybe lower the amount of people getting relegated from Division 5 now by a little bit. Because it does seem like having 4 people relegated essentially from each Division 5 it made sense back when it first started Division 5 because it was sort of meant as like a pool to bring in like even more people who may not always have been of like the best quality, the highest amount of skill. Probably shouldn't say people aren't of good quality. So it might make sense because at this point, if you look at these players, they're all good players. And I'm sure there'll be one or two players who might actually have a pretty decent season and might still end up in the relegation zone. There's still, as I've said before, looking at the results, there are still some people here who might not be the most comfortable in some of the more difficult maps. So it does make sense for them to be around here. But yeah, definitely we're looking at Xander and Artificial here for me to fight for that one promotion spot. And then it'll be interesting. Definitely a good start for Cephalin in terms of the points he scored. Probably for him more so to keep out of the relegation fight. I do think it'll probably not be him to be having that third, well, playoff spot at least at the end of the season. But you never know. Maybe he keeps getting lucky and keeps facing off against the people with the lowest scores.
You never know. Luck can come into it quite a bit. Well, he might not need a whole lot of luck in this upcoming week, though, facing Bombadil, who is at the bottom of the table. Though it is a world map, you never know. This could be the one where Bombadil does turn things around, so he will have to be on his guard. But any of these maps really stand out to you, and you're interested in seeing, Lunacy?
I mean, a lot of these are very interesting. We've definitely got a pretty wide range of matchups here. We've got Cephalin Bombadil, which looks to be a top versus bottom table match. So we'll see if Cephalin can continue to get a little bit lucky and keep up that all wins streak, or maybe this is Bombadil's time to shine. Doing well against a top tier, a top ranked player in the table might be good, especially since Bombadil does have more aces than Cephalin total. Might spell good things for this pretty pinpoint heavy map. Aside from that, that Ollie versus Artificial match is definitely one to watch out for. Especially since I would consider them both to be like top 3, top 4 players in this division. That could definitely make a difference. Ollie is absolutely has the ability or the potential to put out an upset against number 2 ranked Artificial. Aside from that, it does seem like most of these matchups are either pretty similar in ranking so far. So it's really a toss up on how that might go, or like it's pretty clear how it might go, such as in the case of Xander and Vincenzo. Although you never know, Vincenzo being a very experienced player, especially in the fact that like there are world maps every season. So who knows?
Yeah, Calamity, exactly. Some of these players didn't have the best start to the season, but we are on kind of what everyone is able to sort of do quite well, and that is world maps. So we could see a bit of the tables turn on some of these players here.
Yeah, for sure. At least more experience in that regard. Because I'd say a lot of these people have experience playing country maps as well, but it might not always be the countries that we play in a season. I don't think too many people were like, oh yeah, Jordan, I've played that tons in my free time. So definitely more on familiar ground here with the world maps, and I do think we've seen plenty of great performances from Vincenzo before in previous seasons, from Bombadil as well, so you wouldn't count them out too early. We don't quite know yet some of the newcomers, how they'll do on the world maps, so we'll see. And yeah, Ollie Artificial is definitely the match to look at here this week. If Ollie can actually get some points off Artificial, then he might still be in for a fight or a chance of the fight for that first place. Then depends a bit on the matches against Xander. But we've seen Xander drop the ball a bit in previous seasons in some weeks, so nothing's guaranteed yet there. Just if Artificial does end up winning and Xander might win as well, then it's getting pretty big in terms of the gap between the top 2 and the rest.
All right, so shifting over to the other side, Division 5, and their results in Jordan. And again, we see a bit more of a spread here. Not the best of weeks for the Bosnian pair, though some French players, their opponents doing quite well, both of them over 24-9. Yeah, and Sheldon Wong, who is going to continue his good start to the season, another 24-9 result from him, but no perfect games in this one, Lunacy.
Yeah, I think that these fixtures definitely sort of reverse some of the narrative that's been happening in other divisions so far, where a lot of the times, we've had some of the best players in the division facing off against each other and tying when they could have taken it against other players. In this division, it looks like the clear three best scores there were against people who they could have pretty decisive wins against. So I'm sure that Sheldon, Buchanan, and no are pretty happy about that. Aside from that, yeah, it looks like this like 5B had a similarly difficult time to 5A on the map. After looking at the map a bit, it looked like there was maybe one location that like was pretty tough for basically everyone, and then there were a couple other like middlingly tough locations that had the potential to lose some points on, which might explain some of like the pretty huge variation in point totals here. Definitely going to be seeing a lot of huge swings in terms of score difference between different players. But I don't think ultimately that these results are too surprising. It may be surprising that Danny Blondes didn't had a score of 14-8, because I feel like Danny Blondes probably could have gotten a higher score based on their past performance, but a small country like Jordan, it's pretty unforgiving. But yeah, other than that, it just looks like these scores are perhaps as you'd expect based on an analysis of the table.
Yeah, I definitely think Calamity, we could say that the results went the way we would expected. Perhaps maybe not the scores though. Yeah, but definitely one to note here, Noisel and Geoguessr, two longtime Reddit League players. Noisel getting the best of Geoguessr in this time around.
Yeah, pretty good win for him, and definitely a bit surprising there. And it did end up being a close game, just 400 points separating the two of them, with Noisel having the better end there. And there's also definitely going to be some important points for him. Definitely, I think he's also someone who's probably fighting to stay up in this division, and he's got a lot of experience behind him as well in this league. So if he can keep being on the lucky end of some results like this, I think he should be fine. And yeah, sometimes you're thinking, like last week, for example, why is Denny Blonde still in Division 5? And then that happens, and oh, that's why. Yeah, he had some pretty surprising losses in last season as well, which made him end up only in 4th in Division 5B, where even back then going into it, he would have been one of the favorites. And if things like that keep on happening, then it might just end up the same way again this season, where he should be one of the favorites to get promoted, but other people just score more points in the end. And yeah, other than that, I do agree most of the results are as you probably would have expected. With, I think, the Khmer, was that good enough? Wait, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think the Khmer just scored 1 bonus point there, just about having the 5th highest score. So that's nice for him. He at least gets off the table. That's not the expression. Off the ground as well with his first points.
I hope they're not getting off the table.
No. Why are they on the table in the first place?
I don't know.
But yeah.
Well, they're all on the table, but
True.
because they're on this table. So take a look at the table here. Yeah, Sheldon Wong and Arno. What a segue. Arno. Still, both of them undefeated. Just 1 point separating them. That perfect score, giving that 1 extra point for him. And yeah, a couple names we weren't probably looking forward to seeing that far down, like Sugar and Perno and Android towards the bottom. Danny Blondes, despite that tough loss, still sees himself in 4th after that win in the first week. Lunacy.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's a very interesting performance, right? Because Danny Blondes like had a perfect game last week. Has 6 aces, which is tied for the 3rd highest in the division, and yet has a total score of less than 40,000. And I mean, I empathize with that, right? Like, for a long time, I've considered like myself also to be a player where it's like, if I can get a clue in where it is, like, I'll pinpoint it. But if I don't, I'm just bad at picking up like general landscape things, and
Mm-hmm.
you just guess wildly, and sometimes that doesn't work out. So perhaps that's something that happened this week, which means that in a map such as next week, which is by no means devoid of clues at all, given that every location is basically going to be in some kind of urban environment, that might be to Danny Blonde's advantage. But aside from that, this division is, shaking out in a very, very interesting way. From 7 all the way to 0 points, going down the table with a couple of ties mid-table. We can really start to see like that. This is not going to be It doesn't seem like it's going to be ending up as perhaps the tightest of races, especially towards the top. But it is still early game. We've yet to have Sheldon and Arno face. So our two undefeated players in the division. Anything can happen there, and Biquette also not far behind. Also, like Biquette having the highest total score in the division means that it might not be super easy for Sheldon and Arno to keep in those two positions. We've got like the positions 4 through 7 all being 1 point apart, with either having 4 or 3 points, and also with the exact same win-loss ratio. So definitely very evenly matched around there. And towards the bottom, the stats sort of imply that even the ones towards the bottom are also going to remain competitive against other mid-table or even potentially top-table players moving forward.
Mhm. Yeah, Calamity, Jackie, yes, was one of those players we were really looking forward to seeing how he would do. And after 2 weeks, pretty average. His scores haven't been the best, but he has managed to get at least one win out of there. But you can definitely see his aces among one of the highest, so not too bad.
Yeah, I think pretty average is the right expression for that. Currently in 6th. If he continues like that, he's probably going to stay around there. Did have the advantage of Danny Blonde's scoring not exactly very many points this week, but himself did also well enough to get, I think, the 4th best score, so not too bad. But obviously with performances like that, and looking at how well Sheldon, Arnonono, and Biquette are doing, probably not be fighting for the promotion spots. But it's just 2 points. Maybe he turns it around starting now, and maybe he's more comfortable in some of the later maps this season. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who will end up in the relegation spots, because already looking at it, like, you can definitely expect some of the people who've been around for a while here to end up down there. I mean, the likes of Paranoid Android. I'm not entirely. I think he's in the 2nd season. I think he wasn't there for
I think this is
season
his
3.
yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got Geoguessr, who's been here for a long time. And yeah, Noisel
Noisel down
maybe.
from 4.
Noisel's been. How long has Noisel been here since season 1? He's
I
been
think he
here
has.
forever.
He was in
Yeah.
Division 4 for a while.
Yeah, he's been here since season 1. He's one of the few. And it'll be interesting to see if he can manage to keep up here. Yeah, I think definitely top 3 that are currently top 3 will stay top 3 unless Danny Blonde stops those performances like this week.
Mm-hmm. Well, then taking a look at their fixtures for the Volvo World map, and yeah, Jack will be looking to turn things around, but so will Parent Android as they face off towards that bottom of that table. Sheldon, though, at the top will face number 2. So we've got quite a few of those first, second matchups this week, Lunacy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's another one of those delicious 1 versus 2 games. Definitely be fun to watch out for that one. And aside from that, it looks like there's going to be, just a couple of pretty interesting matchups. We've got Biquette against Narayan, who is like a sort of like low mid table player. So if Biquette does well there, then pending the outcome of the Sheldon versus Arnono match, this might be Biquette's time to shine and rise to the top potentially. Danny Blondes versus Geoguessr, like Geoguessr being another one of the sort of like mid-table players at the moment. As we were conjecturing with Danny Blondes, like if Danny can do well in this map, which we know Danny has the capacity to do. That could also be a pretty big difference maker. Um, Aside from that, it looks like the matches generally should be uh, against people in a similar area. Jackass is a name that I've seen in like I've been seeing throughout Reddit, the Reddit Geo Challenges subreddit a lot. So I know that Jackass has the capacity to do super well, especially on a world map like this. But Paranoid Android might be a for me personally at least a bit more of a black sheep. Who knows how that might turn out. They're like despite being at the bottom of the table, Paranoid Android's results were definitely still comparable to people many ranks higher. So a couple of toss ups here and a couple of like matches where you might have an expectation, and if the players don't meet that expectation, then we could see some big shakeups.
Yeah, Calamity, it's a world map. Anything can happen.
Yeah, it's also good to know that it seems like I'm not the only one using idioms weirdly, because I think black sheep is definitely not how you'd want to describe Paranoid Android. At least I don't think that's necessarily what you meant by it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I think I was thinking I might have gotten it confused with a dark horse.
Yeah,
There we go. There we go.
Exactly.
Black sheep, dark horse.
Yeah, it's all animals. It's all one and the same.
I never grew up on a farm.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely could be some interesting games here as well. And especially as I mentioned a few divisions ago, looking at some of the lower divisions here, with 5 minutes of a time limit, that should be more than enough time to get an ace on almost all city locations on the world map. So we'll really see who is capable of that here. And yeah, I think that's probably the right time for Jack to start showing what he's shown in other competitions before. I myself have played against him in a lot of the sort of speedrunning competitions that were hosted by Orpheus mostly. And he's done a very good job always there. It was sort of like, I remember him, Pluki, and me having some very interesting battles there. Max as well, I think, on occasion. So I know he can do a very good job. So we're sort of still waiting for that to happen. Or maybe this week. And then, of course, yeah, Sheldon against No. Very important matchup for both of them. I think they're both kind of want to be looking at a 25k for each of them, sort of to be like, okay, we'll not do any bad against each other, and then we'll look at the other people to get the points from. And yeah, we do also see some games where it's an opportunity for the people who are lower down in the table to pick up points against some of the people higher up, and to maybe that's always probably the thing that you want actually down here in the lower divisions. Like, if you're one of the people who maybe aren't expected to be fighting promotion, then you want to fight against the strong people on the maps that are relatively easy, at least to 25k, because you'd rather play against them on there than on Russia or Australia or whatever else we might get into later on in the season.
Very nice. Well, that wraps up our main competition. We do have a little side competition going on this season, Reddit League Next. And it looks like from the results this week, Calamity, that they had a much better time, at least, than they did in Poland.
Yeah, that's for sure. Probably just based on the fact that Jordan has a little bit less coverage. So if you practice a little bit, or if you get a relatively easy seed. I don't think the next seed was too difficult this week compared to the very, very difficult seed last week. They weren't too far apart, all of them, but you did see some of the people who started week one off on the wrong foot a bit to get some of the better scores here. Chris with the top score ahead of Hodi and Alka City in third. Just Anko falling behind a bit, but the season's still long. We've still got plenty of difficult maps to go. So if you just get like one particularly great performance on one of the more difficult maps, it'll be very quick to make up a lot of points there.
Very nice. Well, good luck to all of them. And to finish up, we will take a look at our map. We've been talking about it all night. The Volvo dealerships in the world. So every single location that we managed to be able to pick up in Street View will be open. There are 1,505 stores that we could be in 63 different countries and regions. So while we're not in every country in the kind of GeoGuessr coverage, we are quite widely spread out, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Until we got to it, Calamity hadn't been played too often, with an average score of only 16,000, and I gotta say that's probably going to shoot up after a Reddit League gets its hands on this map.
Yeah, definitely. I also find like the calling it like 1,500 locations in 63 countries / regions a bit weird, because like, what is it? Is it 63 countries or is it 63 regions? Or do you have like 10 countries and 53 regions? Does every single US state count as one region?
Well, you have to email Ultratech and ask him. I don't know.
Maybe.
It's a very good question. Yeah. He probably copied it from the Volvo website where they're like, oh, yes, we're in 63 regions. And he's like, I don't know what that means, but copy paste.
It could be. Yeah, I think this is definitely the easiest map we've got in the season, especially because, well, the other world maps we've got this season, well, Intersection Guess is only for the 12-player divisions anyway, and the hard world definitely won't be one of the easier maps this season.
Better not.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, I looked at some of the country distribution for that Alok did, who called it like the 24 most difficult countries in Geoguessr, and for some of them I was thinking, I'm not so sure about that, but I didn't like have a full look at it yet of every single country that's in there. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. Volvo dealerships generally, you'll have a pretty clear bias, as you'd expect, to some of the Scandinavian countries, to the US. Also get plenty of locations in Australia, maybe New Zealand. Japan has quite a few of them, as I'm sure Zotomo will be hoping for plenty of those. And then I think South Africa has quite a few. I noticed from what I've been practicing, and I haven't been practicing a lot, so I might have just not seen too many of them, but a severe or a distinct lack of South America. I just don't know if Volvo's like, we're not going to sell any cars there. I don't know. Bolivian is not going to want to drive a Volvo, maybe. But yeah, probably most of the countries that actually there's going to be plenty of countries that people have a very strong opinion about. I feel like just going back to what countries I've mentioned so far, because I feel like a lot of players have a pretty strong opinion about the US, about Japan, about Australia, about South Africa probably. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, Lunacy, your thoughts on the map? Sorry.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say exactly what you were prompting. Sort of coming into this, I was honestly thinking that, well, my first thought was, wow, I can't believe there's a sort of like, a sort of novelty themed map that has enough locations to be playable, but there's definitely more than enough. There's like twice as many locations as there were for the Botswana map last season. But like, one of my main thoughts was like, is this going to be sort of like a little bit of like a more Western centric map? And I've been actually like through practice getting a lot of locations like in places that you wouldn't necessarily like immediately associate with Volvo. Like, I mean, there's a lot of Japan, as you mentioned, but I've been getting places like Taiwan and Thailand and that kind of thing. So it is a bit more world than I was expecting, which is I think a good thing. Although I also am noticing a bit of a lack of South America, or just generally Latin America. I feel like if this is like if you want a 25K this season, this is the map you got to do it on, because it's not just an urban world map. It's like an urban world map where half the time you spawn next to a building that has the city name on it. So like we hopefully should be seeing some pretty high scores, hopefully universally, and I'm looking forward to see I'm sure we're gonna get 25Ks. I'm just wondering and looking forward to seeing how many.
Definitely, not to mention that because you are next to a Volvo dealership, pinpointing will be a little bit easier. You can find hopefully that point of interest is in the right location. So that means that even if once you find the town and the neighborhood, you can actually look for that point of interest on the map and just drop it down. It might be interesting to see how many times, if there are multiple dealerships in town, if people get the wrong one. I would be really interested to see how many times that happens where, one side of town has one and another, and somebody goes too fast, says, oh, there's one, clicks on it and realizes, nope, it was, 2 miles away up the road and there's another one. That's definitely possible. So be really careful, because like I said, there's some bit towns might have like 3, 4, 5 of them. So
Probably, yeah.
Gotta watch out.
I can also bring you some breaking news because Pluky's just played.
There we go. Perfect.
He scored 23,291, so it will be a win for me, and I think it's like the 6th or 7th highest score, so also, unfortunately, I think it's the 7th highest, so no bonus points for him, which is going to just make that game against Verdok for him even more important next week.
Very nice. Well, what a way to finish this, and thank you all for hanging with us. Another long one today, but lots of cool things to talk about. Really interesting how these divisions are all shaping up, and can't wait to see what happens on our first world map of the season. And we will see you all next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.